يعطيكم العافية يا الربع، رجعنا لكم بحلقة جديدة، حلقة خاصة هالمرة، حلقة غير من الهاب توك. حلقة صراحة يعني ما تصير إلا مرة بالعمر أقول أنا. كان ودي الشباب يكونوا موجودين هني لكن للأسف مشغولين بالمعرض. اليوم الضيف مثل ما أنتم تشوفون من أشهر الناس أو من أشهر الممثلين بعالم الفويس أكتينج، تروي بيكر.
Oh,
Welcome sir.
man, my pleasure.
It
man.
is an honor to have you here.
We've been sitting here for like the last 15 minutes. You guys have been showering me with gifts and with presents. And like I told you, it's like my favorite thing to do is to just sit and hang and have a great conversation. It's like we should like turn those beg you, like please turn on the camera. It's like
Let's do a podcast.
yeah, because I always feel like there's something that not every conversation has to be a podcast, but I think that every good conversation can be a podcast. And one thing that I've learned, especially over these last 2 years, where I think at the beginning of the pandemic, like by summer, there were 750,000 new podcasts. Like you couldn't find a USB mic and a webcam, right? Everyone started doing a podcast.
That's right.
And I think that we as a culture have realized that we can spread our tentacles out, sometimes in good ways and sometimes in bad ways, but we saw the necessity to communicate and to connect. And I found that I love doing it. I found that I'm a really bad YouTuber. I've got good friends that are great at it and very successful. And that's not something I'm good at. I'm good at having a conversation, but I'm bad at like doing anything that is built structurally around it. But yeah, anytime there's an opportunity for me to have a good conversation with new friends or old friends, and maybe share, you know, some wisdom or experience through that, I always look for those experiences.
Okay, so first, how was your experience in Kuwait?
Oh my gosh.
This is the first time in Kuwait. You went to Bahrain, you went to Dubai.
Yes, but here's what I love about traveling, and this is one of the things that I missed most about traveling, and I went from 250,000 miles in a year to a dead stop, to none. And then this last, like from October to the end of the year I'll do probably over 100,000 miles. Like, I mean, we're cranking. The thing that I love about traveling is that no matter where I go, I realize that we're not so, the most cliche line ever, we're not so different, you and I. There's more similarities than there are differences. And like being at the airport and seeing a Five Guys, you know, or a Shake Shack, I'm like, all right, you know, it's not that different. And then realizing that, like, the same thing with there were 2 years without there being a convention in Kuwait. Yes. And the first
This
time
is the first one.
This is the very first one.
It's a pop culture convention.
And to see, I was just in the UK, and it's the same excitement, and it's the same community. It's the same kind of person that's there. Someone that's passionate and avid about whether it be animes, animation, some form of pop culture or video games, or just likes even being in the community. There's a lot of people I know that's like, I have no idea who you are. I was like, then why are you, not that you have to know who I am to be here, but there's people that don't necessarily play games, but they love cosplay. And they find so much community in that. And this is where they love going to see their other friends nerd out over something. So yeah, it's been beautiful. And I'm right on the beach. For some reason, I just think, I was even telling my wife, I was like, I'm going to be in the desert. And I was like, yeah, it's a desert, but there's water. Literally right there. I was like,
and it's a private beach.
And it's a private beach. So I was like, so I haven't run naked on it yet, but the night is still young. So we'll see what happens.
And I remember when Akira first arrived in Kuwait, he stood in front of the hotel and he told me, I imagined something else.
Yeah.
He imagined that the convention will be on a tent.
On a tent?
Yes.
Like camels and like
yes.
a whole Bedouin. That's someone that I miss all the time, and he's been so kind to me. He's one of the few people in the video game industry that saw me as a musician, and it came from just a random conversation that we had. He wanted me, I think because of Mary Elizabeth, she was like, hey, will you do a song with me for this game? I was like, absolutely. And so then he goes, hey, do you play any instrument? I was like, yeah, you know, I play a little guitar, I play a little bass, a little drums, you know, piano, and I sing. He's like, okay. And so then we do this song together with Mary Elizabeth, and he was like, hey, do you want to take one of my old songs and like write something to it for this new game? I was like, sure. And so we did that together, and then I get a call at Shout Out the Dam. They're going to do this release party in San Francisco, and he's like, we want to fly you and Mary up, and we want you to sing the song. I was like, great, I get to do 2 songs out of the entire set, and we'll like have some drinks and be fine. And he goes, we just want to know, are you bringing a bass, or do we need to give you a bass? I went, what? He's like, you're playing bass. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And he's like, yeah, you're gonna be the bass player for our band up in San Francisco. And this is like 2 days before. He's like, we're gonna have 1 day of rehearsal and you're flying up. So I went and I bought a bass, and I started learning how to play bass again, because I hadn't picked up a bass in like 5 years. And so I played bass, and then that day they were like, here's your keyboard. I went, my wife's like, you're playing keyboard on this song too. And so I had to learn how to play keyboard like the same day. And the next thing I know, like 6 months later, we're in Paris playing in front of like 3,500 people.
I saw this the live.
Oh my gosh.
It was like mostly I saw the tracks of Silent Hill.
Yeah.
Yes.
We did a full, and there were like it was, I'm trying to remember which song it was, but 2 guys came out and they did like this amazing choreographed sword fight scene, like katana, and then for the guitar solo in one of the songs. And what sucks is the one that they videoed was the first show, and the second show, we did 2 shows in the same day, and the second show was way better. We were warmed up. It was way better. But man, I'm so grateful to him, and every time I've had the opportunity to play with him, or every time I've had the opportunity just to see him, it's like we went to battle together. You know, we got to. Whenever you tour with someone, there's this inherent bond that's very unique.
And I think you work together also on the medium.
Yes. So I think I was telling you this story. Right before lockdown, I never know what to call it. It's like, do we call it COVID? Do we call it pandemic? It's like lockdown. It's like this is end of February of 2020, right before I was supposed to come here. I had taken all these meetings at DICE, which is a week-long convention that takes place in Vegas specifically for developers. It's an industry event, and it's one of my 2 favorite conventions are DICE for the industry are DICE and GDC. And both of those are just to sit and talk with other people within the industry and find out what's going on, what is exciting to people within the industry. And it's just a very collaborative, very supportive environment. And I'd never been to the convention. I'd always just gone to the awards show. And I'm there, and I've taken all these meetings, and I've had these great conversations with, Amy Hennig is doing like an informal roundtable in just kind of one of the back rooms of this one place. And it's a beautiful space for conversation. And I had one more meeting before I was going to fly back home. And it was with this team, Bluebird. And I was like, oh, I'm very familiar with, the game that you just come out with that won a lot of awards. And I was like, you're doing some really cool things.
It was Blair Witch?
Yeah, Blair Witch Project. Yeah. Right before, I guess it had come out like the
year before.
The year before. Yeah. But like critically was received well, and they were doing some really interesting things in the horror space, and they said we'd be interested in talking to you about our next project. So I sat down with them in the lobby of the Aria hotel in Vegas, and they opened up a laptop. They said, we just want to show you a trailer and want to see if you have any interest in this. And they start showing me the trailer, and it's over black, and there was like 1 bar of music, and I was like, that's Akira Yamaoka. And they were like, how do you know? I was like,
his signature.
Yeah, it's like, I know his guitar tone. I know it so well. And it was like, okay, so we can tell you he's the composer or he's working with our composer for the game. I was like, who do you want me to play? You want me to play like, the lead? Or it's like, no, lead's actually a female character. I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. And it's like, do you want me to play the main bad guy? They're like, kind of. And they showed me this concept art, and I went, I'm always looking for opportunities for me to play characters that I've never played before. And I saw it and I got scared, not because the character is scary and it's a psychological thriller. I wouldn't even call it a horror. But because I wasn't sure if I could do it. And I immediately got...
It was a challenge.
Yeah. And I really look for those. And, you know, every role has its challenges somehow, whether you're playing just the, you know, straight white dude in his 30s, or if you're playing a monstrous 7'4", you know, demonic.
So how did you came with the idea of like the voice of the mom, the changing voice?
Everybody has a. It's gonna sound really funny. Everybody has their own way of approaching a role. Some do it from the inside out. Some do it from the outside in. Meaning, there's something inherently that I know about the character that either the material or a conversation with the creatives will kind of enlighten in me, or there's something that I see in the character and that's external and it informs and, you know, internal. If I look at the character sheet and I see that it's an older character, I'm probably going to skew older. But there is, have you ever seen the movie 12 Monkeys?
Yes.
Okay. There is a very small scene in that movie that becomes a big thing where they hear this recording from the past and it informs them, or this recording in the future that informs that everything is going bad, and it's a modulated version of a voice, and it goes, "Have a Merry Christmas."
Yes.
And that was always so spooky and creepy to me. And you find out it's actually the female protagonist in the movie. It's her leaving a funny message on a dry cleaner's voicemail. And so to me, that something that is just inherently natural and even perhaps beautiful, when put through a certain filter and presented in a certain way, to me can be frightening. And so that kind of became the print to me. And one of the things that they wanted to showcase specifically in the character was I love that this became a Medium conversation, like a Medium podcast, but I haven't had a chance to talk about it a lot, is the fact that there is no gender. There is no, you know, Freddy is a man, Jason is a man, Michael Myers is a man.
Leatherface.
Leatherface is a man. Yeah, there's all these, you know, very iconic, typical, you know,
Slasher
masculine
movies.
Characters. And even honestly, like Hellraiser, you know, you've got these supernatural characters that are inherently male. And then you can go the other way around and you can say that, you know, the Woman in Black, or It Follows, you've got these female characters. And the right, It Follows is
I don't know where to put The Exorcist.
Exorcist, yeah, female, but that's also being possessed. Yeah, but there's not a lot of examples of it. Just like it exists outside of the binary male female, and specific to the narrative, it's both. You know, so it's inhabiting both of them. So it's like, how do we find this beastly androgynous sound? And that's kind of like all I really needed to hear. And I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. And we did one session where they fortunately had sometimes it was just grayscale animation, which means there's no color, there's no texture, there's no lighting. It's just the rudimentary character model in black and white form moving through even grid space, like very, very basic stuff. But that tells me kind of a lot. And I read the script and what they all wanted to do, and I got to see some early rough version of the gameplay and how the mechanics were going to work. And there's some actors that don't care about that. Some actors just want to see what is the cinematic element. But to me, if you're doing a TV or film, that makes sense. But if you're doing a game, I need to see how those two worlds are going to interact. In the same way that with the medium, it is about how the physical world and the spiritual world interact and how we move within those spaces. It's a fun game too. If you haven't played it, it's really, really challenging.
I really like the story, the lore.
Yeah,
it was like if you want to understand everything, you gotta read the files, know the backstory.
Sure,
It doesn't tell you everything.
And I think anything on its face like that is kind of boring. I was talking to somebody. We're just shooting this, that evil is boring. And I agree with that. It's there is something that the Ma needed from her, and that to me humanized it enough to make it one of my favorite quotes. Was actually Guillermo del Toro did a podcast with Ken Levine many years ago, and which Ken would be pissed for me saying many years ago. It was probably like 6 or 7. But he said, Guillermo del Toro was quoting Harryhausen. He said, Harryhausen said that the most fearsome beast that you can imagine is one that you can imagine in repose. And if you can imagine that beast sleeping, if you can imagine him feeling pain, empathy, it's what Hitchcock said about Norman Bates. He was like, a good villain is one you can, or not even a villain, but a good monster is one that you can empathize with. And so I wanted there to be this feeling of empathy for the Ma. And I feel like what that game did super well, not only just with the mechanics and with the storytelling ability, but was helping define the relationship that she had with fear and trauma, and being able to, everybody wants to feel like they can slay their own dragons, and that the things that have defined them, the trauma that has defined them, is actually something that they can face and overcome. And there's been a phrase that has come to me over even just recently, but especially over the last 2 years, that adversity should refine us, but not define us. And I think too often there's this goal of, even like there's a lot of people with masks that say that, you know, we can't prevent disease. And it's not about, we don't wear masks so that we prevent ourselves from getting it. We wear masks so we prevent other people from getting it. It's about caring for other people. And I think that the notion of avoiding adversity is never the goal. It's about making sure that it's a safe way to do it, and that the adversity doesn't destroy you. But for me, adversity is not our enemy. Adversity is our teacher. It's a friend that is there to reveal my strengths and not expose my weaknesses. So that, to me, what the medium did was something that was a very good allegory and metaphor for doing just that.
So we were talking about the medium and Silent and Akira Yamaoka, and Guillermo del Toro. So let's talk about BT.
Okay.
Did you try BT?
Yes. I'm not a horror guy.
Really?
No. And that, so my friend Alana Pierce has I think it's a PlayStation 3 that she will never connect to, or maybe a PlayStation 4. Yeah, PlayStation
also
4.
Also me, I have two with BT.
Well, yeah, she'll never connect it back to the internet because she doesn't want to lose the demo. The amount of, like, the Resident Evil and Resident Hill, well, that would be a crossover, wouldn't it? Everyone, fans would be like, what just happened? That's chocolate and peanut butter. The, Resident Evil VR, or sorry, Silent Hill. Yeah, it was Resident Evil VR.
VR Resident Evil 7.
Yeah. Man, come on, Coffee, do your thing.
Even before releasing Resident Evil 7, they released the kitchen.
Yeah.
It's a demo for Resident Evil 7.
Like that to me was such a great, like I grew up on like the old FMV horror games, and the ones that were just, even though the fidelity of it was so low, the vibe of it was so intense. And it's something that I'm not a fear guy. There's a lot of people that love to expose themselves to that, and whatever that is within you that brings joy, I would love to know what that is.
That's me.
But is that for you?
Yes.
Man, I don't have that inside of me. But the thing that I did play PT, and I was like, anything that's done with excellence, I can admire and appreciate. It may not be my cup of tea, it may not be the genre of something that I like, but it doesn't matter. It could be a horror film. If it's done with excellence, then I'm like, that draws me in. But a lot of times, especially the horror genre, relies on the jump scare, they rely on the blood, they rely on the gore, without really doing something with excellence. And PT, and maybe it was because it was so short.
And it connected people like on the internet, because it had messages in different languages.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they needed to solve the last puzzle. So people were talking on the internet, like translating the script to each other and trying to help each other.
Well,
I think he did this concept again on Death Stranding.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
That's always something that, and I remember there were a lot of conversations that the first time we ever met about this, and this was a project, you know, working on Death Stranding was, before it was even Death Stranding, it was, matter of fact, the first time he mentioned it to me was at DICE. No, actually, it may have been at E3 when we were talking about, when we were doing Metal Gear. Mm-hmm. He said that he wanted to, you know, he was like, I want you to be in my next thing. I'm like, man, anytime. Directors say that and actors say that, and it's not that it's disingenuous. It's just maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to rely on that because it's a wonderful sentiment for someone to even want to work with you again. Mm-hmm. And then we saw each other at DICE, and he was like, the game's going to happen. I'm like, bring it on, boss, whenever you want to do it. And then I saw him again at the, I think it was at E3 later, and he said, you know, we're this is happening. It's really happening. And then I'll never forget this. We were at San Diego Comic-Con at the Entertainment Weekly party, which is a big shishi party that happens on the rooftop of the Hard Rock, or did at least. And everybody who's everybody is there. And then there's me, who's feeling like a milk bucket under a bowl. Just didn't quite fit in. And then I'm talking with some friends over here, and I feel a tap on my shoulder, and I look, and it's Hideo, one of his producers at the time, and he was like, we want you to meet your co-star. And I was like,
Norman.
My co-star? I was like, for what? He says, yeah, he drags me through the crowd, and I look, and there's Norman. And he was like, here's your co-star. He's like, hey, man, I heard a lot about you. I'm like, what is happening right now? And Norman and I had met briefly before, and we shared a smoke and talked about motorcycles at the Game Awards, as a matter of fact, in all places. And I was still like, I have no idea what's happening. And then like I guess it was 6 months later, we were on set shooting together, and I'm licking Norman's face. He's a good dude. That guy is probably the best work ethic I've seen of anybody in Hollywood. He's diligent. He's open. And on a game like Death Stranding, where it's so, everything that we were seeing was in such an abstraction, because you have to keep in mind, you know, if you're on a big film and it's like we're shooting green screen or whatever, you can kind of understand the space that you're in. But everything was so abstract.
The motion capture.
Yeah, but even just like the character design and like when Hideo would say, you know, it's like, you have this lion creature that's behind you. And it's like, okay. It's like, but it kind of looks like this. And I was like, what? How big is it? He was like, it's ginormous, you know? All of those things for any actor are a challenge, but especially if you put that, you're not in your costume. You don't have a real functioning prop. That can be an obstacle. That can be a source of adversity. And to see someone like Norman Reedus, who has such a body of work behind him, and also just such success, for him to choose the challenge and for him to stare down that adversity and meet it head on, was really inspiring to watch. He's someone that both he and Hideo both are someone that I would work with any day of the week.
I think he's working on something new.
Hideo?
He's probably working on something new.
That man will never stop. I think he even said that he was like, I won't stop until I'm in the ground. And I'm like, I think even then you'll find a way to keep going.
He even just opened a studio for production, movies and anime, I think, in LA.
Yeah, he wants to. That man wants to tell stories in any way that he can. I mean, he's obviously for 30 years he's been telling stories within the game space. I think for anyone who has such a love for cinema as he does, and honestly has such a breadth of knowledge about it, like he's he'll forget more about filmmaking than I'll ever learn. I'd love to see what he does with just a movie. Like what does it look like for Hideo Kojima to do
a movie or
do a Hideo Kojima film, not just a Hideo Kojima game. I think that would be very compelling, or even better would be an episodic series to where he could really flesh out the world and the characters.
Okay, so I think before we end, I'm gonna ask you the most difficult question.
Go.
What was your favorite character that you did?
It is probably next to how do I get into the industry. Is probably
okay. So the character that you felt connected to, from Revolver Ocelot, from Jewel to Booker Duet.
Oh my gosh. The goal of an actor is to connect to every character that they do.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some characters that I'm instantly there, and there's others that are not. Sam Drake was one that I felt instantly connected to. And I can't mention Sam Drake without mentioning Todd Stashwick, who's become a friend and also did a lot of the groundwork for that character. And there's so much about the story that changed and that surrounded that game with Uncharted 4. But Todd has been incredibly gracious because that was a character that he really originated and then stepped aside and allowed for that character to grow beyond him. And it really speaks to his character. But when I stepped into that, I think because of my connection with that franchise specifically, and even my friendship with Nolan, allowed me to just instantly drop into who Sam was. Joel was harder because of the age difference that I had, and the life experience. Not just, Joel lived through one pandemic and I lived through another. But at that time, I had no notion of what that would even slightly look like, and what fatherhood would look like. And not only just fatherhood, but also the ultimate fear of any father, which is losing their child. And doing it, I've talked about it ad nauseum as far as doing the Sarah scene in part 1, and how much of a challenge that was for me, and even coming back and having to reshoot it, because it is such a challenging scene. And any actor that's faced with a scene like that it's a challenge. And there are more actors that are more skilled than I am that could probably have gotten to that moment faster. I wasn't there. I wasn't equipped enough, and I feel like I've grown. But I can tell you now, if I had to do that scene again today, I don't think I could do it, because I now understand too much of what that would feel like to be a father, which speaks to Neil Druckmann, because he wrote that scene as a father who had just become a father. And it's a very authentic moment for him.
I remember, we did a survey to our followers asking, what is the saddest moment in video games? And number 1 was the first scene in Last of Us.
Yeah.
People saying that they cried when they saw this moment.
I do every time. And to me, yes, I feel like that moment specifically was a watershed moment in gaming. Not that there have not been incredibly emotional moments since, or incredibly emotional moments before in video games. The thing that I feel is a bigger challenge is what we did in part 2, which was, we can make you cry. We know we can do that. Is it possible for us to make you smile after the cry? Then can we also make you angry? And then can we also make you happy? Can we also make you experience joy? Can we hit all of the other heartstrings that you have besides the first one that we hit? And I think that's what a lot of people, I even struggled with the story. I support it fully, but to say that it wasn't to wrestle would be an insult to the material, because it was made to be wrestled with. I have total empathy for everyone who had a struggle with the story. The point is not to not struggle with it. The point is to struggle with it and move on, and let that story move you to where it wants to take you, because where it wants to take you is a beautiful place. And it was so expertly, wonderfully meticulously done. But so many people stop too early on. So within every good story, it's about seeing the story all the way through and not ending it too soon.
Okay, so I guess we don't have enough time.
We'll never have enough time. For
We'll
this
never have
conversation, but I'm glad we took the time we did.
Before I end the podcast, what is next for Troy Becker?
I have some really cool things lined up. We have the Far Cry DLC that's coming out, which people are going to be able to revisit. As we've shown you, they're spotlighting the villains.
I saw the first DLC. It was amazing.
Yeah, the one with Voss.
Yes,
So much fun.
it was amazing.
So it's something that I was really honored that they asked me to be a part of and to come back for. That character specifically is one that I've just so much fun. That's the one that we can talk about right now, and then hopefully I get to come back and we can talk about all the other stuff that's happened between that moment and this.
Okay, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
It is really an honor to have you here.
The honor is mine. Thank you.
Thank you. يعطيكم العافية يا الربع ومشكورين على المشاهدة ونشوفكم إن شاء الله بحلقات جاية. يعطيكم العافية والسلام عليكم.